Welcome to Three Films and a Podcast, the show where destiny brought together three friends to enhance each other's cinematic journey by watching three new movies in a series of themed rounds. There is no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode, as all film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy! Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Three Films and a Podcast. My name is Ben Lawhorn. As always, I am joined by our own connoisseur of the roads, Tyler Beck.
Yes, that's me. A lot of good roads in this week's episode. Plenty of roads.
A lot of good
roads. A lot
of
road conversation. Lots of good stuff here.
Indeed. And the man with zippers on his jacket and jingle bells on his toes, Mr. Matt Weiler.
City of trees, baby.
City of
jingle,
trees.
Jingle.
Lots of trees.
Holding it down. For those of you new to the show, let me welcome you to our movie club. For those of you who are returning, welcome back to the movie club. We're happy to have everyone back. You can find us everywhere online at 3filmspod, all the socials and all that stuff. Or you can go to our website, 3filmspod.com. Everything is there. Links to our socials, links to our episodes. We're on all the podcasts, everything's, and on YouTube. So if you kind of want to look at us while we're talking, that's the place to go. You can check out these faces.
Have you ever seen Matt Weiler? Look at him.
I mean, come on. You might just get distracted and not be able to pay attention, but I don't blame you for that.
Yeah, get a good look, because there's only 40 minutes left here. So
yeah, suck it in right now.
Soak it
in. This tape's going to self-destruct once you watch it. Yeah, welcome to Pride Month. This month we are focusing our round entirely around LGBTQ plus movies. And I'm going first this round, and we are kicking it off with the 90s cult classic, My Own Private Idaho. I am very excited to dig into this movie. This is something that's been on my list for a long time. I feel like I'm a big fan of Gus van Sant, the director, but I've surprisingly seen very little of his, but I'm always just like, yeah, no, I love Gus van Sant. And I was like, well, I've seen Good Will Hunting. I saw the Psycho, like shot for shot remake, which for me, it wasn't as bad as like people say it is. Like, it's not good. It don't need it, but it's just like,
why?
It's like, yeah, it's just like, I don't know why you did it, but I watched it on a plane, and it's a perfect plane movie. Like, oh,
it's cool, like he lost a bet or something.
You know, give me every Hitchcock movie and throw in Vince Vaughn, and I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just like Vince Vaughn in everything. Yeah, what's the Vince Vaughn Vertigo like, or North by Northwest?
Yeah, exactly.
Which
I actually do want to see that.
I know, I do too, 100%. You know, like I would love to see it. And I got thinking about that movie while watching this as well, because a lot of cool, like, you know, people on a road with no one around them kind of shots. Like, nothing quite like that North by Northwest shot. That one's like obviously like iconic, but it was still kind of cool to see that. But yeah, I mean, think, those.
You know, Vince Vaughn and North by Northwest, I think, is probably the best matchup. I don't know if he works quite as well for Vertigo, but yeah, the cocksure drunk, whatever,
for sure.
Yeah,
it's weird because I think he's like personality wise, maybe more of the Jimmy Stewart in Vertigo. Like, I could buy him being more the comedic because Cary Grant's just so handsome. You know, just like you're just got to be a super handsome person. But all those like drunk scenes, I think he would just like he'd play that stuff perfectly. But
totally.
Yeah, it was weird to watch this and go over Van Zant's filmography, because it's like, oh, like I could, you know, we like to do a Rushmore, and it's like, what if you do Van Sant? Like, oh, I only have 4 movies. Like, that's it. You know, it's like the ones I mentioned. I saw Milk, and then now this. So this is definitely something I want to see more of. I'm also like been really interested in The Elephant. I think that one would be kind of a cool watch, and Last Days. So,
I mean, behind the scenes for our listeners and viewers out there, I've been pushing for a Van Sant round for a while, and for whatever reason, we keep bumping it. And I think this week's movie, the inclusion of this movie into this round was, I think, in large part due to, I think you guys felt bad that we kept bumping Van Sant.
We got to keep Tyler here. What can we do?
Yeah, got to keep me happy.
Let's give him a Van Sant. He's been dying. Yeah, so we're talking about My Own Private Idaho. It's kind of loosely based on some of Shakespeare's plays, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, and Henry V. The story follows 2 friends, Mike Waters and Scott Favored, who are played by River Phoenix and Keanu Reeves. Who,
ever heard of him?
Yeah, ever heard of him? I mean, we'll get into him, but like, man, some great performances. Like, I know Keanu gets like shit on a lot for just like being Keanu, but like I liked him in this one quite a bit. I think he worked well. And then speaking of people that I like, but I haven't seen a ton of, like River Phoenix, like I think he's always good in the very limited things I've seen. But in this one, it's like, man, he did a great job. So yeah, this movie's about them embarking on a journey of personal discovery. I didn't realize just how much traveling we were going to do, like I guess thought it was contained. Like when the whole Rome thing came up, I was like, are they really going to go? Or is like, I feel like something's going to happen. It's going to keep them from going. And then also it's like, oh no, we're in Italy. Oh, okay, cool.
I was kind of pissed.
Yeah. I thought like the guy was going to come back after getting busted on like the motorcycle and be like, no, give me my money back or whatever, So yeah, it kind of caught me by surprise that they followed through with it and went there.
Just like selfishly, I just wanted to spend more time in Portland and like, I wanted to spend more time in that region. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we can talk about that later. But so when they actually did go to Rome, I was like, oh guys, like, but Portland's not good enough for you.
Yeah, this isn't Seattle.
If you live in Rome, don't take offense to that. Tyler has no problem with Rome. Okay?
Not at all.
No, Rome is a beautiful place without a doubt. But yeah, I'm excited to get into this movie and talk about, I guess, all of our experiences with it. But quick synopsis from IMDb. Two best friends living on the streets of Portland as hustlers embark on a journey of self-discovery and find their relationship stumbling along the way. Tyler, what's your experience with this movie? Is this like a first watch for you? What'd you think about it? Like, yeah, let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, before I get into that, I love the IMDb synopses. Sure.
Synapses.
Whatever, whichever one of those words is correct. Ben, you put it on the screen. And then, yeah, but I like, so do they find their relationship stumbling, or do they find their relationship while stumbling along the way? I couldn't quite figure out what the synopsis meant. And, cause does their relationship stumble? Like, Mike takes a shot, but he gets shot down, but he still has his friend,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. So like I said before, I've been pushing for a Van Sant round for a long time, honestly, specifically to watch this movie. I've had this movie circled for a very long time. And for whatever reason, I just have never gotten around to do it. And, I'm glad we finally did. And it's one of the rare times where this could have been a disaster for me because my expectations were so high. Because like you, Ben, I'm like, I like Van Sant. Like Good Will Hunting is one of my favorite movies of all time. So, and I guess that might be the only one I've actually seen. I went through his filmography. I'm like, oh shit, maybe that's the only Van Sant movie I've ever seen. And maybe that's why I've been so interested, because I was like, I'd heard the lore about like this movie or Drugstore Cowboy, like or Elephant. Those are kind of movies that are brought up in conversations about being cult classics, being dark, being gritty. And Good Will Hunting is none of those things, but you can certainly see the through lines in his filmmaking style. But anyways, I think I've always been curious about his work because of Good Will Hunting, how much I love it. And I was, just curious to see like what some of these other more underground, quote unquote, movies would be like. So this was my first time watching it. I sat down and watched it a few days ago, maybe about a week ago. And I was blown away, guys. Like it was like, like I was saying earlier, it was the rare occasion where like the expectation met the experience. Like it was exactly what I thought it would be. It was like, there's certainly things that you could pick apart. There's like stylistic choices. The way that they use like a Shakespearean prose can be hard for some people. The pacing might be kind of weird. The characters themselves might be off-putting to some people. Like I can see all those things, and like, it's a very surreal type of film. It does sort of film like a fever dream throughout the whole thing. So I could see why it might be off-putting to some people. But for me, it was just such a beautiful experience. And I don't know if it had to do with like my own personal relationship to that region of the world. Like, obviously the three of us are from Utah. I lived in Portland for 4.5 years. I've spent tons of time in the rural parts of Idaho and Oregon and Nevada and Utah, California. Like, and all of like this movie, just all of those areas look the same, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So like this movie, like just looks like all the places that I have such a nostalgic attachment to.
Okay. Yeah.
And so watching this movie was kind of like, it was just really interesting. I felt like the way I put it in Letterboxd as I sort of felt like I saw the like the other side of my nostalgia, or like the bizarro version of my nostalgia, where like the experiences that these characters are going through in these places that I recognize and have such fond memories for, like they're not exactly happy experiences. They're not necessarily living a good life as far as what's considered normal or the status quo is concerned. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, I mean, they're sleeping outside at,
sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But there are certainly people that like choose that lifestyle. You know what I mean? And so like, if that's what you choose, that's great. I'm not like disparaging it, but like I wouldn't choose it. And I think probably most people listening to or watching this pod wouldn't either. So I don't know. I just felt like I was like stepping through the looking glass. You know what I mean? I like really went into like, I really went down the rabbit hole, and I don't know. I had just seen so many people that look like these characters. I've had friends that look and act and like run in the same circles that these characters do. And it just like it felt very close to home to me, but also like arm's length enough where it didn't like, it still felt like a journey. It still felt like I was seeing a world that I don't normally have the privilege to see. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, just the beautiful relationship of the characters. And I personally really liked the surrealistic, filmmaking style and the choices they made and the strange dialogue. To be honest, I didn't really understand a lot of what they were saying just because it's that Shakespearean pitter patter.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could kind of like, sort of like what we talked about with like Throne of Blood or watching like the tragedy of Macbeth. It's like, I get it, but I don't know what they're saying. I couldn't tell you a word they just said, but like I understand the thoughts and the sentiment. So
exactly, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, man. That was a pretty long ramble to say that I just really loved it. It blew me away. I had to sit with it for a while after it was over. I really was like, I don't know how I felt about that, because you don't necessarily feel great coming out of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's
even
not
though
exactly
it says have
like,
a nice day, it's like, listen, Gus,
sure,
don't tell me what to do.
It's like, don't be a dick about it, Gus. But I don't know. I just like, it made me feel like watching these characters made me feel like guilty and grateful. I thought it was like a haunting, heartbreaking, and at times beautiful story. And I don't know. I loved it. It's those aren't necessarily feelings. You don't want to feel that like sense of sorrow and dread and like helplessness and defenselessness and, whatever the word is when you put yourself out there and get shut down. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to feel all those things, but sometimes it's nice to feel it, I don't know. I'm going to keep rambling. Stick with me for just a minute. We don't have a guest, so I feel like I have extra time to.
Oh, we've got all night.
We've got all night. It's all you.
We don't have wives or kids or anything. But I couldn't, like, something that Palcher said when we were talking about Joker. He's like, you just didn't like how this movie made you feel. And I think that's true. I think that's probably a big reason why I didn't like Joker. But quite honestly, this movie made me feel a lot of those same things, right? Like, we're watching people slipping through the cracks of society. They're marginalized and they are slowly just fading away into the abyss, right?
Yeah.
And they're like when I say I've seen characters like this, there's a specific shot of Mike. He's like sleeping on the sidewalk towards the end of the film. Like, I've seen that guy. We've all seen that guy. Everyone's seen that guy. No matter what city you live in, no matter what vacations you've been on, like even if you're from the most quaint little town in America that has never seen a homeless person in its existence, like you've gone to the big city and you've seen that guy, right? And we all do it. We all drive by and we're like, oh, that sucks. And we, go about our lives. And I just think it was so, I guess, interesting, for lack of a better word, to actually see what that guy's life is like,
Yeah.
And to be fair, like Mike has compared to what could happen to someone who lives that lifestyle, like he's got it pretty easy, comparatively speaking, I guess. I don't know, man. I'm really rambling, but I guess to bring it back to my Joker point, I don't like to feel the way that this movie made me feel, but at least it was, for whatever reason, this movie made me feel, at least it was done in a way that I felt was like thoughtful. You know what I mean? I didn't think there was anything thoughtful about what they did in Joker. And they're two weird movies to compare, but I only compare them in the sense that they're both dark, they're both gritty, they both represent a marginalized section of our society to some degree.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily totally make that argument for Joker, but I think you know what I'm saying.
And they
But
both
at
have a
least
Phoenix brother in them, you know?
Yeah, they both have a Phoenix brother, and I don't know. I'll wrap it up here, but I don't know. I say all that to say that I just loved this movie so much.
Well, I'm just really glad that Todd Phillips didn't direct this, because I'd probably hate this movie if he had. So,
Totally.
yeah,
There'd be some good dancing sequences in it.
True. Yeah.
True.
We didn't get any bathroom dancing. Matt, what about you? What are your thoughts?
So I was similar to you, Ben. It wasn't exactly what I expected in that, like the traveling aspect. I guess I just assumed. I guess the fact that it's like LGBTQ plus month that we're covering this, and it's called My Own Private Idaho, and like the stills that I've seen of this movie made me feel like it was going to be like more like a Brokeback Mountain story, like very isolated to a small town, you know, in the American Northwest. And so I was surprised to see it bounce around even to Portland and then to Rome. But I mean, I was on board with it. A lot of what this movie kind of handles was not what I expected at all either. It shows a lot of difficulty for just like weird experiences. Like Scott's experience is interesting. And my view of Scott is, man, he's like just like the ultimate example of privilege. You know, he's able to come in and out, you know, with no problem. You have people really suffering with real traumatic experiences, and that's led them to the life that they're living. And he's kind of exploiting it, doing it for thrills.
Totally.
And even along with Mike, like, yeah, he's a good friend, but it's still self-serving. Yeah. And with Bob, his experience with Bob is self-serving. And the moment that those two are no longer serving him, he's gone. And it's cool that, and I've appreciated all the Shakespearean adaptations we've watched. There's that famous quote that oftentimes is misunderstood, where like good artists borrow, great artists steal, or whatever.
Yeah.
People like to use that to justify plagiarism, when in reality, I feel like when someone's able to artistically adapt a story like this in this way, where you are telling the story of, you know, Henry IV, Henry V, and both parts, it is making a very unique story. And I thought that was an interesting vehicle to tell this story with, and the way it all unraveled. And to Tyler's point, it's like, I guess you could pick this movie apart, but at the same time, I feel like they went far enough with the avant-garde side of things where it's a lot harder to pick apart something that's intentionally experimental.
Totally.
I like when an artist can take it all the way one direction. Like in art school, sometimes something will like flirt with being on the experimental artistic side, but it doesn't go far enough. And so it doesn't feel deliberate. And that's where people are like, oh, this felt inconsistent. Like this felt off.
Yeah.
But when it goes far enough, because this doesn't go crazy, like this isn't a full on like acid trip. But it does have enough like experimental stuff with it, with a lot of imagery as metaphor. Even in the dialogue, there's metaphor. And Tyler, as you said, like they'll throw in Shakespearean prose. I feel like it was just enough to be like, okay, this is a cool experience, you know, start to finish. And just to go along with what Tyler was saying, the comparison to Joker is valid. And I think it does play into why I think part of the reason the three of us don't like it. I mean, Ben just needed Todd Phillips out of the picture.
It's all Todd. Classic Todd.
But like Joker, you're exposed to a lot of the same issues, a lot of mental health or mental illness issues that plays into like societal stigmas, where people are downtrodden, you know, pushed into like unlivable circumstances, and they rely on the streets, like all that. And it's heavy stuff. And Joker almost like points the finger at the audience and like tries to justify the Joker's behavior in like a weird way. Whereas this, you definitely recognize, you know, where we're failing these people.
Yeah.
But it's also not in the same way. It's not necessarily trying to make you say that you're the bad guy or that you're the reason they're there. If anything, you like, it very clearly shows Scott as the guy who, you know, he's right there. He's now, you know, a rich man, and he's right there by all of his old people, and he could lift all of them up if he wanted to.
Totally.
Yeah, 100%.
And chooses not to. And the audience, I think, is on board with that. Whereas the way the audience feels in that circumstance right there, the movie The Joker is making the claim, in my opinion, that that person doesn't exist.
Right.
There is no person in between saying that this is wrong. There's just the people who are downtrodden on these people, and then, you know, the Joker.
I want to, something you just said, you know, Scott is in a position where he could lift them up if he chose to. And we as the audience are on board with that. I actually think the movie does a good job of portraying that, like, the characters, the group of people he's in with are on board with that too. That they don't seem to care very much. They don't seem to look at him as much of a meal ticket. I know there's some mention of it that, like, oh, he's going to be my big ticket, or he's going to whatever. But I don't think
Bob Pigeon.
Yeah, I never got the impression that they truly felt that way. And I think there is some level of truth to that. From my experience with people that I know that have sort of run in those circles, and like I know people that have hopped trains and, like, you know, done like the gutter punk thing and like lived on the streets, lived in those houses, like lived at like the rainbow gatherings. Like I've talked to a lot of people that have lived that lifestyle. And there's something about like the inclusion of it. Like if you're there, it's like, it's either your choice or it's not. And either way, like, they're welcoming and they seem to be accepting. I'm not saying that there's like not problems or issues within that in group, but I think that's why I like this movie so much. One of the reasons I liked it so much is because to me, it did seem to do a pretty good job of conveying something to a mainstream audience that is not mainstream and is hard for the mainstream to wrestle with, right? Like these are people that, like, this lifestyle for the most part is fine for them, right? Like,
yeah,
sure, they, like, everyone wants better than what they have. That's a universal truth, no matter what, you know, rung of society you happen to live on. But I think that's something important about this movie, is it really shows how beautiful that lifestyle, like that community, can actually be. It might like look ugly to like my sensibilities, right? Like I have to have my four walls and my air conditioning and my TV and, you know, my comfortable things and my nice food or whatever, my nice car. But you
rub it in. Jeez, dude.
Yeah, I'm really living the life. Look at these walls. Look at these walls like behind me and all the things I have. Yeah. But I don't know. I think that's one thing I liked about it, is it seemed to be a pretty truthful depiction of, like, these are people that are living in the fringes, living in the cracks, living on the other side of Looking Glass, like I put it. And for the most part, they are happy to be where they're at. You know what I mean? Like, they have their community. And I think that's important. I think it's a really important thing that this movie didn't like demonize that circle. Like, it could have easily shown them as like just straight up demons, you know? And they certainly do some demonic things, some like
I mean, it's like out of survival or whatever. It's interesting because like, honestly, like if you break it down, we shouldn't really like the Keanu character, because he kind of like, he's never really at risk. You know what I mean? I think that's the difference here. Like, they all have that community and stuff, but if he wanted, he could snap his finger and have a car there to pick him up.
It's for a thrill.
Here. Yeah.
Right.
He's there for a thrill. He goes and mugs with them just for fun.
But I think he even talked like, I never keep the money, you know, I like the adventure or whatever, but all these other people are doing it out of survival. Well,
and even in the, like, given the time period, like even his fluidity sexually is something that he's exploiting, because he's not as he says to Scott, he does not reciprocate the feelings.
Yeah.
And then he falls in love with a woman. And so it's all just for money and for thrills. Yeah. And I think, like you said, Ben, like technically he's not a good character at all.
Yeah.
Right. But I will say he at least treats the rest of that group with respect. Right. Like, he doesn't, he doesn't, in my opinion, seem to act like he's above them, but he's certainly a tourist, which in its own way is fairly condescending. But at the very least, like, you know,
I think we like him though, because like we see him taking care of Mike.
Totally.
You know, like there's on paper, he seems like someone who's like, oh, this guy's just like hanging out with him to get, you know, just like, oh, I'm going to live a cool life. But, you know, once I get my trust fund, I'm out of here. I'm going to be cool. You know, it's like Oh, that kind of sucks because like you're just with kind of like it seems like you're exploiting this group a little bit. Just like let me do this for a little bit. Let me play house, so to speak, and then I'm
Right.
going to get out of here and I'm going to go to my four walls and roof like Tyler, just rubbing it in
Yeah,
front of everybody. But
living it up.
yeah, exactly. So, but I
My
mean, but I
favorite part
like
about
the
that joke is like you have like a whole bookshelf full of cool stuff, but like 3 computer monitors behind you. Matt's got a bunch of cool stuff behind him. I'm the only one that literally only has walls behind me.
But hey, rub it in, come
They're
on.
good walls though.
They're
Really good
sturdy
walls.
walls. Yeah.
Sturdier than mine.
Nah, I don't know if that's true.
City of trees. But
Yeah,
yeah,
how many
so
trees did you have to chop down to build that house?
Too many.
how many Lorax did you dehouse by building
It's a
your
good
house?
thing you live in the city of trees.
That's right. No
Plenty to
shortage.
go around.
But yeah, I like the Keanu character. I think they make him endearing, and again, like because he takes care of Mike, I think we're just like, okay, this guy's like got a good heart. Like he may be doing this just like for his own entertainment to some extent, but like he is like a decent person. So like we kind of like that character. And River is like the other side of it, where it's like he's kind of here by necessity. Like he has to be doing this. So it's kind of interesting to see their dynamic play together. But I thought like all the cities were shot really kind of cool. Tyler, you brought up a point that actually I hadn't really thought about till right now, but it is interesting seeing like the other side of these towns that we kind of know really well. And it made me think to an extent, this might be a stretch, but like, I think that's also kind of where my fascination and love for The Last Black Man in San Francisco came from, because
Yeah, I was thinking the
we
same
get
thing.
to see the
Yeah.
community that's been like gentrified and like pushed out of San Francisco, and the people that like grew up there, and that was kind of like my dad's family, and then it got moved to like South San Francisco, and then like I don't even know if any of them are in San Francisco proper anymore, but that's because everyone gets priced out, and it's like interesting
Right.
to see that side of it, of just like, especially like Seattle, like that's like honestly probably almost as expensive as San Francisco now, and it's like, yeah, you'd like these people have to live on the street, like where could they afford to live, kind of thing. So it was interesting. I didn't even make that connection until you brought that up. Like, oh yeah, it's kind of like seeing the other side, or seeing how like the other side of like sees the city, as opposed to just like as a tourist, like
Right.
let's go to the Space Needle or whatever. It's like the people that are living here and just trying to survive is kind of cool to see that and spend time with those kind of characters. I mean, I thought the cinematography was fun. I mean, just really well done. There was one shot I loved, like it was just of the handle of the motorcycle, but it was like from underneath and stuff. Like, man, that's a really cool shot. Like I like that shot a lot. There was some cool stuff here. I thought the performances were all great. Going to Italy was like a fun surprise. I enjoyed that as well. And
Speaking of the performances, what is the two of yours, like, since we're on the personal experience segment of the show, what is your experience with River Phoenix? Because I think this is the only movie I've ever seen him in, except for Stand By Me. And he's sort of like a mythic figure, like and correct me if I'm wrong, but did he die of an overdose?
Yeah.
Did
Yeah, he
I say
did.
correct me if I'm wrong, and then I ask a question? That's hilarious. But yeah, I know, like, he died tragically young. He seemed to be this talent that, everyone said he was going to be the next James Dean or whatever. But I didn't have any experience with his work until this movie, and I got to tell you, I see it.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
He
I
was
guess
great.
he was young Indy in the Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah,
But
those are the two that I've seen, or
Yeah.
those two. I think it's probably what a majority of people have seen.
he
And
floored me in this movie.
Oh.
He is so good.
he was great. And even when we kind of get that time jump, and all of a sudden he's got like kind of the bouffant kind of hair, it's like, oh, he can like really transform too. Like he looks great. This is kind of rad to see this, because he could play both sides of it. But yeah, his performance was really strong. It made sense, when people have talked about him so much, because again, my main thing was Stand By Me. The indie one I think is like really quick at the beginning of that movie. So I liked him in Stand By Me, but it was cool to finally like take in a strong lead performance of his. And some of the trivia like talks about, people tell him on set, like, you're the next James Dean, and Van Sant was like, I don't think he's ever seen a James Dean movie. Like he was like traveling with his family. Like he's not like a TV movie guy, so it's like people are like giving him all this praise. Like, I don't like, thank you, but I don't know like how to take that necessarily, or what that comparison is. So yeah, I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting. I think maybe this is a good break into our 3 films trivia because there was a lot of cool stuff with this movie.
Yeah.
Really interesting to read about. I think we're all maybe kind of the same, where once I'm done with the movie, I pull up the IMDb trivia because I want to like learn as much as I can about it. I think it's one of our favorite things about this, since all these movies are kind of new to us. So yeah, let's get into our 3 films trivia. Matt, I'm going to kick it off with you. Did you find anything that was really interesting to you about this movie?
Well, sticking with the River Phoenix theme, I haven't seen. I saw Stand By Me. I may have seen another one of his movies, but this is definitely the most. I would consider it my first real River Phoenix experience.
Yeah.
Super awesome performance, and this isn't really trivia, but I could not and I'm sure people have talked about this already, just given the nature of how popular the show was. But the character Kurt Hummel on Glee looks exactly like River Phoenix in this movie, and I could not stop seeing it.
Nice.
The only difference is that Kurt Hummel has like a 10 octaves higher voice than River Phoenix does.
It's interesting you say that because when we started watching this, Ashley was like, I think she said that she thinks Timothée Chalamet fancies himself a River Phoenix, which I could kind of see that a little bit. I don't know that he's pulling it off, but she also brought up another good comparison that I think might be kind of Harry Styles. I think it might be kind of interesting to see what his acting career, that trajectory, because we've really just kind of had Dunkirk. So I'm really kind of curious what Don't Worry Darling is going to do for him, because I liked him in Dunkirk.
Star
I think
Fox?
we all did. What about what?
Isn't he Star Fox or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
At the end of Eternals.
Eternals,
Yeah, spoilers for anyone who
not the
hasn't seen
N6, not the N64.
Yeah, I know. I was like, wait, they're
classic
adapting the 64 game and he's Star Fox. That's
fucking
awesome.
love that game.
Awesome.
Sign me up.
They should make that. They should adapt that into a movie.
Yeah,
oh my god.
Let's have the
I'm sure they will.
multiverse with Sonic.
Mario.
You know,
as soon as we get big enough to have our own production studio, we'll greenlight
make it happen. We're greenlighting Star Fox with Harry Styles.
The trivia that I found, I was trying to think of a fun way to segue, but I couldn't do it. I guess Star Fox is cool, and the trivia I'm about to say is cool because Keanu's so cool. We'll go with that.
Everything's cool.
Just the cool through line. It's one of my favorite John Prine songs. Everything is cool. Anyways, apparently River Phoenix's agent refused to show him the film treatment for the movie. So in late 1990, Keanu rode his motorcycle from Canada to Gainesville, Florida to hand deliver a copy of it to River Phoenix, and I thought that was just so fucking cool.
That's so cool.
Like,
does it say why
Keanu? It doesn't say why he wouldn't show it. Maybe I could research it more. I'm not going to, but I suppose I could.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was so on brand for like everything you hear about Keanu. He just seems to be like the coolest person in Hollywood. Like it's just such a badass story. Just hop on his Harley or whatever and hand deliver a VHS copy or whatever.
I mean, this is kind of cool. I was pulling up Keanu's filmography, and basically he did like the 2 Bill and Ted's and Point Break right before this. I was like,
so they had to stop production of this film because of Point Break.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Which is kind of weird to think about because I actually, Point Break is obviously, I think it's the top 4 most mentioned movie on this podcast.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I'm sure to Matt's chagrin. I don't know how much he loves Point Break, but
wait, have you seen Point Break? Have we talked about this?
I haven't seen Point Break. No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Oh, what a treat for you! Summertime watch party.
Well, it's not going to be a treat because now it's not going to live up to the expectations.
That's true. That is a bummer for you.
That is true.
But no, I thought it was because Keanu seems. I just watching My Own Private Idaho. I was like, oh, this must be like one of the first few things he did. But like this was right in his. Like Keanu becoming Keanu.
Street, this was post Babes in Toyland, so he had made it already. So we knew he was on the trajectory that just like to the moon.
He already left Cincinnati.
He had made it.
Buddy, this is your fucking wake up call, man. I am an FB. I come from CINCINNATI Cincinnati.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. It looks like in '89 he had like finished filming Parenthood, where he kind of plays this kind of like the race car driver, like free spirit dude. So I could see him like channeling that and be like, I'm gonna go ride my motorcycle across America down to Florida. But Parenthood also with Joaquin Phoenix. He just really likes working with the Phoenix brothers. So
I like to think that the same motorcycle from this movie is the one that he drove down to Gainesville.
That'd have been awesome.
I'm just going to pretend that's the case.
I love it.
Because I was thinking, I was like, those dudes, that's a long drive from Portland to wherever they were in Idaho. It's at the very least 6 hours, like minimum 6 hours. I've done that drive many a time. And that motorcycle would not be a comfortable ride, especially with two dudes hauling across through the Columbia Gorge. It's so windy, and I mean, it's a beautiful drive. It's not a bad drive, but it can be windy, and I can see that being not very comfortable. I don't know.
You've had 2 pair of gloves the whole time? Yeah, man. In the Rockies. Yeah, that would be a nightmare. For mine, kind of an interesting scene that we'll talk about in a bit with the campfire scene, but I think it was really impressive. It's interesting that River Phoenix wrote the campfire scene in private on little scraps of paper. I guess the director, Gus Van Sant, thought he was just like writing song lyrics or something, and was kind of surprised when River told him that he had rewritten the campfire scene. And I think it's so powerful, kind of specifically relating to it being Pride Month and the LGBTQ plus like theme that we're going with here, because there's a critic, Todd Haynes, who was talking to Gus Van Sant and just talked about how critical the campfire scene was to the film's success. And Todd Haynes said, like, quote, "Before the scene, it's almost like all the kids are victims of homosexuality. And then there's this scene where they're all sitting around and telling stories of being raped and abused," which was like super rough to watch that stuff. But and he says it's not until River Phoenix and Keanu Reeves sit around the campfire that you see one of the hustlers being gay in an all natural environment with no money exchanging hands. And that was like one of the coolest quotes, I think, of the whole movie that, you know, I'll say for our next segment here. But it's just like, it was amazing to me that a scene that really was, I think, kind of like the most pivotal scene of this whole movie was rewritten. Like, I don't know exactly what it was initially, but just to like the faith that Gus Van Sant had in River and that Keanu had in him as well. Like, yeah, I think this is like a good way to do it. And just such like a powerful scene for sure, to say the very least. So
yeah, that's one thing I've read a lot about, is like Van Sant's willingness to like let his story evolve and change, you know, like that's a hard thing for a creative person to do. Like, I've had my own issues with that in the past with things I'm working on, and people want to make a change to something, and like I have my own precious idea about what it's supposed to be or what I'm trying to do, and I can't see it, and I won't, you know, I can't go along with it. But I think he deserves a lot of credit, because that scene was crucial for this movie to work the way it did. In my opinion, it was probably the best scene in the movie. It seems to, like, doing research online, it seems to be the most well-regarded scene and like the famous scene from the movie. Yeah, I think that's a really cool thing, and I guess Van Sant credits Kubrick for that. He said that that's something that he had read Kubrick was willing to do, was to rework his stories, rework his scripts, and like change things and let them evolve into what they end up being. And I guess you could argue what they're meant to be, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool thing that Van Sant did here, and apparently he does in a lot of his work, because it's a huge scene, and for him to just straight up give the credit to River Phoenix is pretty cool. I could see someone's ego being like, "No, we worked on it together. I helped him. We, you know,
the foundations were there. He just kind of fine-tuned it." Yeah. No, I think that totally makes sense. So,
and it makes me even more sad that we don't get to see, because if River Phoenix really did, so apparently the character of Mike was supposed to be a straight guy, and River wanted him to be homosexual.
Interesting.
And then he rewrote this scene. So like, those are two like really important choices for this movie. And like, I really wish we could have seen the stories he would have told and the things he would have made throughout the rest of his life. It's such a shame.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I think along with just like that crop of actors of that time, as well as like Van Sant and the subject matter of this movie, and it being as avant-garde as it is, it seems like that type of, I guess, character development is more provocative, especially for the time period. And a lot of times people will err on the side of being provocative, and then it loses itself in there, and sometimes makes things worse. But it takes good restraint, but also it takes like a good discernment to be able to identify something and be like, okay, this actually improves dramatically everything.
Yeah.
Kind of what Ben pointed out. Like, I was watching the first part of this movie, I'm like, I wonder how the community feels about this movie up to this point, because, coming from I mean, we're in Utah, we could blanket a homophobic like a homophobic bubble, you could say, that we grew up in.
Right.
And really a community that up until, recently is very unempathetic towards the LGBTQ plus community, and would see the first half of this movie prior to the campfire scene, and maybe even after. I'm pretty sure they're not the target audience for this movie, but would watch that and all of a sudden assign, oh, that's why they're the way they are. Like, oh, this is what happens, and so it is important that irregardless of anything in this movie, he's in love with Scott, and he professes it over the campfire, and it has nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think that's a great segue into our next segment here. I think let's get to our elevator pitches.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
We're familiar with this, but the people who might be listening for the first time, this is our segment where we like to pretend we're in an elevator with someone, and we have just a couple minutes to kind of show them a scene of the movie that we're talking about to kind of get them hooked. Maybe explain like why we're watching this movie, and just like, here, watch this. Like, this is a great example, I think, of this movie, or just to try to get people interested. So, I say let's dig into our elevator pitches. Tyler, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought of, like, it's got to be the campfire scene. Like, that scene, I mean, we've said a bunch of stuff about it already. It's just beautiful. It seems so honest and so earnest and so just bare, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's just like, it's just so, it's quiet and it's effective, and it's, I don't know, it was just a really beautiful, really cool scene.
I could love someone even if I, wasn't paid for it. I love you and you don't pay me.
I do hesitate to show it to someone without the full context. I don't think it lands really without the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
So I don't think it really works as an elevator pitch, but I think it sounds like we're all in agreement. It's probably the best scene in the movie. I mean, that seems to be the consensus in all the things I've read about it, and the things that we've talked about. And I think I would want to show someone maybe one of the scenes where all the, like, one, like the way I want to put it is like the Lord of the Flies scenes where they're all in the tenement house together.
Yeah.
Just any one of those scenes where they're bantering back and forth with Bob, and they're doing the prose thing, and Keanu's really hamming it up, and all the, like, just that sort of like jovial, just sort of frenetic energy in those houses. I think would be really interesting to show someone. I think it's important. I think that's what I like those scenes so much, kind of what I was saying earlier, because we could have easily just gone in there and just had a bunch of like droopy-eyed, like nodding off people with needles sticking out of their arms, and it could have been a really dark, scary place, even more so than it really is if you think about it. Those alleyways that you walk down, like those, I mean, those are still there in Portland. Like Portland looks, honestly, minus the elk statue that they show in the city, like it looks exactly the same. Like that elk statue, unfortunately, was torn down in the George Floyd protests.
Oh, okay.
It was like some kid, I guess, lit it on fire. And so the city actually took it down. Apparently it's in some safe somewhere or something. So it's not destroyed, but it's not there anymore, which is unfortunate because it was really cool. A big prominent elk statue. But that city still looks that way. Like it still looks exactly the same. Like there's a big building that the locals call it Big Pink. It's just this big pink building that sticks out like a sore thumb. That was, you can see that in the movie here. And it, like, everything about Portland looks more or less the same. Obviously there's been some like changes and the city's grown here and there. Well, quite a bit actually, but for the most part, the overall look and feel of it still feels very similar to what we see here. And so I just think it's important for people to see that, like, in, down those alleyways and behind those walls and those like tenement buildings, it may not be that much different than what you or I might experience when we go hang out with our friends. Like, it's dirtier, it's not as comfortable, but there's still some level of joy. There's camaraderie, there's friendship, there's a community there, for better or for worse. And I think it's important for people to see that. And I think for all those reasons, I would show just any one of those scenes.
Cool.
I can't think of one in particular, but that's probably where I'd go here.
Nice. I like that. How about you, Matt?
Well, it's well documented on here that I like to pick the scene that just seems the most, bizarre or something that you just simply haven't seen before. And I think I would show the scene in the adult store.
Absolutely.
where Keanu on the magazine is, given a monologue.
Yeah.
I think is probably a scene where you see it and you're just like, what am I watching and how have I never seen this Keanu scene before?
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly.
It's really good. And apparently, like, they didn't do that with CGI. They actually filmed them through plexiglass, and then they did like matte painting to make it look like a book rack.
That's
so
cool.
Like they built this big, I don't know exactly how they did it, but they did it all practically, which I think is really cool. And in all honesty, that's the other scene I wanted to pick, but for the sake of variety, and I talked myself into my actual answer. So
Nice.
So that works. But yeah, that magazine scene was like really cool, and it still seemed impressive, even given the fact that like the three of us could go on After Effects right now and recreate the same thing with little to no trouble.
Yeah.
It still seems surprising and interesting and cool. And yeah, like how have we never seen that before? Like I don't, other than like the Harry Potter trading cards or whatever, like I don't I can't remember too many other times where that effect happens, so it's
kind of subtle at the beginning because like we're just seeing the different magazines covers and it's like, wait, did their eyes just move? Because like we're kind of cutting quickly. Like there are a few like montage quick snippets, sequences throughout this movie. And it's kind of just like, wait, I think they just moved, and then all of a sudden like we're holding on like all 6 covers. And I think it's a great scene too, because that's kind of when we learn that Scott's a trust fund kid, basically, and he's just kind of like, oh yeah, like I don't need the money. And then everyone like is kind of looking at him like, wait, what? Like, why are you doing, just kind of like, there's that banter, I guess, that kind of goes on. It's like, oh, he's just like doing his thing. He just wants to like experience this life, before he like settles down and becomes whatever the fuck he becomes. I don't know what it is exactly, like a banker or just like a person who has
politician
money, whatever that is.
something.
Yeah.
Just this.
Yeah. Cause his dad was like the mayor or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. My scene actually, Tyler, is kind of what you had mentioned. I really enjoyed that. We meet Bob Pigeon, and it's like when we first see him, that's a lot of the Shakespearean prose. I think, it's like, that man owes me money. It's like, what man? The fat, like they kind of go through this whole thing.
I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree.
Hey, everybody! Here comes Bob the Chiseler! Here comes Bob the Sewer! The Thrasher!
I think my friends can see that I am back from Boise.
And then, he's like kind of laid out on the bed, passed out, and they're trying to like rob him of, both his drugs and his money. But then it turned into this whole thing where we're kind of like going through the house, this like abandoned building that they've kind of like taken over. And talking about like planning to rob people, but it's where we meet Flea, who like I'm always just happy to see.
Totally.
Yeah,
he was awesome.
Like, oh, cool. And he was totally in. He was doing like the Shakespeare prose, like during the robbery scene, like he's all there. So I love how much he commits. I mean, talking about like Point Break with Kiedis and Big Lebowski with Flea. Like I'm always whatever Chili Pepper wants to show up in my movie, I'm here for it.
Well, apparently Van Sant said like he had a lot of praise for Flea. He was the one guy that was down to do whatever I said. He's like, if there's something I needed him to do, like Flea was all in on everything. I thought that was dope. And that totally makes sense for what I know about Flea, Yeah.
So yeah, if you get the guy who will just wear a sock, over his cock on stage, it's like he'll probably do whatever you're asking him to do. Like, how do you feel about Shakespearean prose? Like, nah, man, I draw the line there. Sorry, I can't. Like, if you want me to do this movie naked, I will, but I will not speak in Shakespearean prose. But
it's funny when
really
you. Good. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, when I saw that you had written this down on the document, I thought you were talking about the scene where they go rob the concert promoters in the park.
Oh yeah, they do the second robbery kind
which
of
thing. Which is St. John's Park in North Portland. Beautiful park.
Cool.
There's a really cool bridge. The same architect that made or that designed the Golden Gate Bridge designed St. John's Bridge.
Heard of it.
So if you're ever in Portland, go visit. It's beautiful. Because that would be another scene I might show someone, is that robbery scene. I thought that was really fun. And so I thought that I just saw the Bob Pigeon robbery because they end up double crossing Mike and
that makes
Scott
sense.
double cross Bob Pigeon. But
yeah, I just like being able to kind of see the house and like the squalor,
Totally.
I guess, that they're kind of living in.
no,
Like
I
how
feel bad.
everyone's kind
I
of
stepped
okay
all over
with it.
your.
Oh, I don't
pitch.
care, dude. Like, there's plenty of them. There's a cool one, like when the cops are coming and I was like, let them in. It's like this kind of like cat and mouse chase. Like, there's a lot of cool scenes that people could show here. I think it, like you said, it kind of gives the good sense of community. But yeah, I think we've kind of gone over some good elevator pitches. I think now we've sold people on it. So it's time for us to head over to our drive-in double feature here.
I just had sex. I'm about to eat nachos. It's the greatest moment of my life.
Sponsored by really good friend of the pod, Adam Driver. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight.
Thanks,
Maybe
Adam.
next week.
One of these days.
He'll be here for sure. But yeah, Adam Driver has a drive-in and lets us show a double feature with whatever movie we're talking about, and we get to pick the other movie and kind of pick what order that we'd like to show them in. So yeah, I'm curious to hear what you guys would pick as your double feature. Matt, I'm going to throw it to you first.
So I went back and forth on this one. I have two that I feel like, it's too bad it's not a triple feature. We couldn't swing a triple feature at Adam Driver's Drive-In, but we do have a double feature.
The city ordinance has a cutoff time.
It's weird. Whatever.
Yeah.
No, but I was thinking about how in the development of this movie, there's a lot of roadblocks because of the homosexual themes of it and studios not wanting to push it. And it's just interesting that we're still kind of in that arena where it's tough to put a mainstream movie out on this type of with those type of relationships. And
totally.
I think the closest, Disney's like inching ever so slowly towards it. And they're getting a lot of crap for it.
They got a toe in the water.
For all the crap, you think they'd be just like bulldozing it in people's faces, but it's like they are, tiptoeing towards it. So I would show, I think it's a Pixar movie that came out last year, Luca.
Nice.
It also kind of ties in because it takes place in an Italian type
a little
area.
moped.
I don't know if it's actually Italy or if in their world it's, I don't know. I'm not sure how much is fantasy and or whatnot, but has some Italy in it. But there's some similarities between some of these characters and their relationship. Only in Luca, it's reciprocated. It seems to be. So I would show Luca first.
Nice.
Let the kids watch it. Let the kids go to bed.
Yes.
And then
little melatonin. Let them. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Make sure they're asleep.
That's the red drink. They get the melatonin.
No homemade red drinks.
Yeah.
No sugar-filled homemade red
That's
drinks.
right.
Unless you crush up the melatonin in place of the sugar.
My honorable mention would be, and I would not be surprised if Wes Anderson took some inspo from this, but Darjeeling Limited.
Yeah.
There's that whole sequence where they're seeking after their mom and they're trying to find her. They eventually do, if you haven't seen it. And it's not what they expected. So there is sort of that letdown there, but they're traveling on a motorcycle at one point, kind of similar shots to what we see in this movie.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think a motorcycle Rushmore would have been kind of cool. I would put like Motorcycle Diaries on there. I really think that scene of Dumb and Dumber is worth putting it on there too.
For sure.
On that little moped, but that's awesome.
Yeah, we did actual motorcycles, our favorite motorcycles, but not our favorite scenes of people riding motorcycles.
I think we could save stuff,
We could have done that, but that's okay. We can save it for another one. Well, I think those are great picks. I've seen Darjeeling Limited. I have yet to finish Luca. We started it and we just decided it was too late. So I'm due for a revisit there, but I'm going with the nostalgia theme here. Nice. And I'm going with Salt Lake City Punk, not just because I lived in Portland and this movie takes place in Portland and I'm from Salt Lake and SLC Punk obviously takes place in Salt Lake, but I do think there's a lot of similarities, like the whole point of Salt Lake City Punk is that there is a community of people that are not only present, but like thriving in spite of the, I guess, overwhelming societal oppression, right? Yeah. Salt Lake's a pretty specific place and there's a very specific, especially at the time this Salt Lake City Punk was made, there was a very specific form of oppression for, punks and vagabonds and rockers and stoners and whatever, like to be in that society, or to be in that community in Salt Lake City in the time that movie was presented, was arguably more difficult than it could have been in other places where it's maybe more accepted. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think, so they're similar thematically. They both take place in like the darker corners of a small Western American city. And they're both a lot like Salt Lake City Punk, I think, is more fun than
it's got Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, it's got Matthew Lillard, and it's got young Jason Segel, which is really fun.
Nice.
So yeah, I'll probably show My Own Private Idaho first, and then SLC Punk to round it out. And that's where I would go there. Called the I-84 double feature from Salt Lake to the I-84 double feature from Portland to Salt Lake.
Nice. I like that a lot.
Interstate 84. Yeah.
My pick, Matt kind of alluded to it earlier of like, I guess what I thought I was getting was Brokeback Mountain. And I think I want to kind of scratch that itch because I really love that movie. I think it's a beautiful movie. Not just like visually, I think it's just like, it's a great film. So yeah, I would just kind of want to do that. I would want to see that relationship that Mike was like really looking for in this one. I like to see that on screen. So I would show, probably this one first, My Own Private Idaho first, and then into Brokeback Mountain. Cause if I can cap off the night with Heath Ledger and Gyllenhaal, the lesser Gyllenhaal, but Gyllenhaal, little Anne Hathaway, like no complaints from me. So,
and it's the unfortunate tie-in of, talented actors gone too soon.
Yeah. It's very true.
There's an interesting through line there.
Yeah, without a doubt. So yeah, that's what I would go with. But I mean, I think all these double features sound fun. Yeah, I kind of want to go through final thoughts. If there's anything we haven't covered. I actually have a question. I'm curious, Tyler, since watching this, do you feel more intrigued to pick a Van Sant round still? Or do you feel like you're good to go for now? You're still, yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, I was just looking through his IMDb as we were talking. And I mean, there's easily 3 movies that I would want to see like
nice
right now. And we've talked about 2 of them. I'd love to see Elephant and Drugstore Cowboy, and then pick another one. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome. Yeah. Any other final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I feel like I could talk about this movie for a long time.
Yeah. No,
just because I don't know. It did have such like, it just hit me in a way that I wasn't expecting. I expected to like it, but I didn't expect to like connect with it as much as I did. You know what I mean? And I think it is just because it looked so familiar, and it just was, it's like kind of like what you were saying earlier, Ben, you put it really nicely, but I could see myself standing in any one of those same spots and having a different personal experience with it that would probably have been for me, like, like I have a happy memory at a very rural road in whatever town. Like I can think of times where I've been in those moments in my life where, like you're on a road trip and you're out in the middle of nowhere and it's beautiful and you're having a good time or whatever. And then to see that same scene presented so in such stark contrast to that, like these are people that are lost and they're trying to find their way, and they're not they're there out of necessity. They're not, well, Scott's a tourist, maybe I just liked being able to see this movie through Scott's eyes. I've always sort of had you guys know I've had a fascination with like the darker corners of society. So I think this movie just fits right up my alley. Oh, one thing I think is funny, the beginning of the movie, they are purported to be in Idaho, but you can clearly see Mount Hood in the background. It's like a prominent feature in the background. You can't see Mount Hood from Idaho. I promise.
Try as you might. I think that's a really interesting perspective again on like the places that we've been and seen, and then like the other side of it. It made me think also of like the Before trilogy, how like those credit sequences, like we see all the streets that they walk down. Yeah. It's like, I feel like some of these streets are the same ones that we kind of see like in the Italy, it's like, oh, they're totally, that's just, they're there now. So, I think overall recommendation from all 3 of us.
Oh, one more thing. The sex scenes were really interesting. I thought they were really clever. Those weird, like those snapshot montages of the strange poses. I'd never seen anything like that before. And that actually might be a good elevator pitch scene for like that, for Matt's criteria.
Yeah.
Cause I've never seen that done before, but I also would want someone to experience that within the movie. So
For sure.
Probably
Yeah,
would've
those are
showed some,
really
but-
interesting. Like they were very well done. And yeah, without there really isn't like a ton of like gratuitous sex or anything like that in this movie. You know, like
Kind of skirts that in that way.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the most aggressive thing we see is like the very first sex scene, you know, with Mike. But even then, like we don't really see anything. We're aware of what's going on. But other than
A cabin
that,
explodes. Yeah, there's a ton of metaphor.
Yeah. Which is kind of cool.
That was another thing that that I thought during the movie I didn't remember until now. I think while all of us watched The Power of the Dog, it was kind of interesting how much visual metaphor were in both of these movies, as well as some of like those, I don't know, the I don't even know the term for it, but like he's like seeing a face on the road, you know?
Yeah.
And it's similar to like seeing the dog in the mountain.
Totally.
It's like,
That's a cool parallel.
kind of interesting. Yeah, the way they're weaving in these themes and metaphors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good call.
I thought it was really well done. There was one too about like the house, I guess, that kind of, you know, drops on the street or whatever. He had talked about, but Van Sant had talked about that being like the metaphor for like being your childhood home. And then once that like gets destroyed, it's kind of like you can't go back home. Like everything's like different now, whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of like how it all works in that scene. So super cool. Again, recommend from all of us, and I guess look forward to a Van Sant round coming up in season 3. Very excited about that. We'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this movie as well. Also stay tuned for the rest of, you know, our episodes for Pride Month. Next week we'll be coming back with Call Me by Your Name, which I am very excited about. I still have not seen that. So I'm super stoked to get into that. And then we will wrap it up with The Handmaiden, which I'm also very excited to see. So thanks everyone for your support. You can find us everywhere at 3 Films Pod, and we will see you next week.
Bye everyone.
See ya.